Well, hey everybody, thank you for checking in once again and welcome to another episode. Film is undergoing a big resurgence and it's more popular now than it has been for some considerable time. But it can be a bit expensive getting into film. I've got a camera here. This is the Nikon FM. This is a lovely camera. This camera will cost you, with this lens, a 50mm f1.4, it will cost round about £200, possibly up to £250. Now, that's not particularly expensive, but it's not particularly cheap either. This is a great camera, but there are other great cameras that can do exactly what this can do, make just as nice images as this can do, for far less cost, and I'm going to show them to you today. So, cheap ways into film photography. Well, we've got plenty to show you today. Let's begin with rangefinder cameras. A rangefinder camera is different to an SLR. You may have been used to SLRs in the past or DSLRs. With a rangefinder camera, you look through the window here, you see a split image, and as you turn the lens, that split image comes together, and when it comes together, you'll focus. So you don't look straight through the lens on one of these. They're much smaller than SLRs usually, and they're much more discreet than SLRs usually as well. This is a Leica with a Leica 50mm f2 Summitar lens on the front. This camera and lens would cost, gosh, I don't know, £400 to £600. That is starting to get a little bit expensive, but you can buy a nice cheap rangefinder that will do pretty much exactly what the Leica will do. And I'll show you one now, if I can find it. This is the cheapest rangefinder you can buy. This is the Fed 4, made in Ukraine, as I understand it, many years ago. And this is based on Leica technology. It's a sort of an evolution of the Leica technology. It's lever wind, so that makes it nice and easy to use. It's a well-made camera, and it comes with an Industar 61 lens usually. The thread, the mount of these cameras, they use the Leica thread mount, so you can use Leica lenses on these cameras. You can also use former Soviet lenses like this Industar on Leica cameras, the earlier Leica cameras. So you can put any lens you want on this. There are thousands and thousands made in L39 mount. This camera has a light meter, so that's nice and handy. You don't have to fiddle around with keeping a light meter in your other hand. It's much easier to use with a light meter in it. A camera like this will cost between £20 to £60. I've bought them for £10 with a lens. They were made in the millions. They're not particularly popular, but they're a great camera, and they are easily the equal of the early Leicas, in my opinion. Very good camera. You could also consider, if I can find it, yeah, here we are. You could also consider the Zorki 1 or the Fed 1. This is an exact copy of the Leica. It's got a lens, which lens? An Industar 22 lens, that's the most common one. It's a collapsible lens. It's a beautiful thing. This camera cost me about 2 years ago, admittedly. This camera cost me £40. So even now these cameras will sell between £50 and £100 with an Industar lens like this one, a lovely collapsible one. You get all the cool points of a Leica, but for what, 10 times less the price. You might also consider, that's the Fed, you might also consider, this is a copy of the Pentax camera, the pre-war Pentax camera. This is the Kiev, the Ukrainian Kiev camera. These are wonderful old things. They're so silent. Listen to the shutter. That's really quiet. So they're very discreet cameras. They're also extremely cool looking cameras. Just look at that thing. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it elegant? Isn't it spectacular? I think so. It's a bit large, but there is one without this big meter on top. Some people prefer that. It gives the camera cleaner, smoother lines. So there is a wonderful old Pentax copy. The mount is the Pentax mount, the pre-war Pentax mount. This camera does not take L39 lenses. This camera takes lenses in the Kiev/Pentax mount. But they are cheap. They're cheaper than L39 lenses. These lenses are very cheap because not so many people use Kiev cameras. Very, very nice lenses for a lot less money. One of these cameras you can find between 40 and 80 pounds, something like that. Very nice camera. What else do we have? Oh, someone's pinging me. What else do we have? We have this camera. This is the Zorki 4K. This was a very, very, very popular camera. These were made in the millions. There's also not all of them are Zorki 4K, some of them are Zorki 4. In fact, most of them are Zorki 4, but there's lots of 4K models around. The 4K has a lever wind, while the 4 has a knob wind. I think this is a very, very cool looking camera. I like the lines, I like its appearance. I love the Zorki 4K cameras. It comes with a fantastic Jupiter f2 50mm lens, and this is very, very, very nearly the equal of the Leica lens. This lens is 99.5% as good as the Leica lens. It's a beautiful old optic. Love the old camera. Yours for what? Between 50 and 80 pounds, something like that, with a lens. They're not particularly expensive because so many were made. So there are lots of choices in the rangefinder section, and you can go and do some rangefinder film photography really very cheaply. But if you don't fancy a rangefinder, then you might care to use one of the very cheap SLR cameras that we have. Here is a Zenit camera body. I'm afraid I've neglected to put a lens on it. Let's pop a lens on it so you can see it in its full glory, because it is a kind of a glorious old machine. It's very, very simple. It's not a complex camera. It's very much a bare bones camera. It does have a lever wind, so that's good. But it's very much a bare bones camera. There's no prism in the viewfinder. It's just either in focus or out of focus. There's no prism there. So you just have to have good eyesight to use one of these. But they are good cameras. It's got a light meter in it, so it will tell you the exposure. And one of these, between 40 to 70 pounds with a lens. They usually come with the Helios 44 lens, which is one of my favourite lenses, and it's a fantastic lens. And these are fantastic SLR cameras. Very, very nice cameras. Very, very cheap cameras, and very, very effective too. However, if you want a little step up from the Zenit, you can go for, and I'll put the lens on it because this is the lens belonging to that camera. This is a Praktica SLR, and there were loads of these made. This is an MTL5B model, but there were LTL345s, MTL345s, and they all look like this. They were all essentially the same camera with detail differences. This is a really nice camera, M42 mount, and I should have mentioned that about the Zenit. This has an M42 mount, and when you're looking for SLRs from the 70s, 80s, even from the 60s, there are two mounts that you should look for. M42 thread mount, that's a screw mount, and K mount, which is a bayonet mount. And either of those cameras will give you access to thousands of lenses. Everybody made lenses in M42 mount, and everybody made lenses in K mount. So we're going to look at a K mount camera in a moment. So M42 and K mount are the best lens mount because they offer you a very wide choice. This is M42, so it can mount loads and loads and loads and loads of lenses, so it's really cool. Shutter speeds 1/1000th of a second to 1 plus B. I've found these cameras to be pretty reliable. They're a camera made in the old East Germany, which of course no longer exists, but these are nice, simple, tough, reliable cameras. They do have a ground glass viewing screen, they do have a prism inside, so they're easier to focus than the Zeniths. You can mount a range of lenses on them, as I say, so this camera, you can make any image you want with a camera like this. They're very, very flexible, and they're every bit as good as cameras like the Nikon FM that I showed you earlier, or you know, the higher tier models from other manufacturers also. This will do everything that they can do for a fraction of the price. One of these, gosh, I don't know, 40 to 60 pounds, probably less if you're patient. That is a good deal. K-mount, right. Many thousands of lenses were made in K-mount. I've got a K-mount camera here. This is a little Vivitar XV20, but there are many others made by Cosina, Pentax, Chinon, Vivitar. There's loads of these cameras around. K-mount lenses, there are so many you can mount. This has got a Vivitar 50mm f1.7 on it at the moment. It's a simple little camera, but what matters with these cameras is not the body. What matters is the lens that you put on the camera. Okay, the body is just a body. It's essentially just a box with a shutter on it. So really the lens is important, and on a K-mount body you can really just take your pick. There are thousands. Very nice little camera, 40 to 50 pounds or so, not expensive. This is the Pentax Spotmatic, Asahi Pentax Spotmatic, and this is a real tank of a camera. I think this camera will not only outlast me, but outlast anyone I know and their friends and their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren and so on. I think this camera will last for many years. Pentax kit is extremely well built. It's got on it the Pentax lens, the 55mm f2. This is a beautiful lens, and this was a kit lens sold with these Pentax cameras. It's a conventional body. It's got a light meter inside. It's lever wind, shutter speeds 1 second to 1,000th plus B. It's an M42 camera, screw mount, so the lenses screw on and off. You've got access to not only all the wonderful Pentax lenses, all the Takamars, but any other M42 lens as well. You could put a Helios 44 on here if you wanted, or any other M42 lens you can name. This camera, I bought this with an f1.4 50mm. I paid £75. That was a couple of years ago. I would imagine a camera like this with this lens, the 55 f2, I think you'd get one of these for between 60 to 80 pounds or thereabouts, maybe cheaper if you're persistent. A very good deal indeed, a very high quality camera, built like a tank. Another good camera. This is from Olympus's consumer line of cameras. This is an OM30, but they also did an OM10, 20 and 40. This happens to be the 30. It can do pretty much the same as the OM1 and OM2 cameras can do. It's got aperture priority auto exposure as well as manual. This is quite an advanced camera. It's a very groovy looking camera as well. Some plastic used in the body. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. It's an Olympus OM camera. It takes all the Zuiko lenses, and it's very nicely made, and it's quite small in the Olympus tradition as well, and it's got those classic SLR looks if that's what you're going for. If you don't mind not having classic SLR looks, consider something like this. This is a 90s Canon camera. It's the Canon EOS 3000. This is an auto everything camera. You can put it in manual, but I just use it in auto. Aperture priority auto. It's auto focus, it's auto exposure, it's auto everything, and I think it's great. It works really well. It doesn't have the classic SLR looks, but it does have the classic 90s SLR look. You can put any Canon EF mount lens on here, including the modern ones. I think it will drive the modern ones. You can certainly put these lenses on digital cameras. If you have a DSLR, Canon DSLR, these will mount. Mount is the same, so you can interchange your lenses. It's just a great little camera. You know, they're not very sought after, I think, because they don't have that classic SLR look, but they will become sought after. So if you want one, get one now. Right now they're really cheap. You can get one of these for between 30 and 50 pounds. Likewise, you can get a Nikon version. This is, what's this? This is Nikon F60. This is quite a substantial camera. Again, it's a plastic bodied consumer level camera from the 90s, but it will take all Nikon lenses going right back right into the 50s, and I believe it will shoot the modern Nikon lenses also. You can probably, I think, do correct me if I'm wrong, but you can put this lens onto a modern Nikon DSLR and it will work. This is an auto everything camera. Great. In my view, makes everything nice and easy. Auto exposure, auto focus, just push the button and you're free to compose and, you know, think about visual elements in your shot rather than messing about with the tech. The camera will take care of it and you can just get on and shoot. Again, what, between 40 to 60 pounds, probably less if you are patient. Right, there's one more category of camera I would like to show you today. They're available pretty cheaply. They are from the later end of 35mm camera production, and they are the point and shoots. Now, don't look down your nose on point and shoots. Don't switch off when you hear that phrase, because point and shoots are really good cameras. At least some of them are. You could buy, if you want to, a camera like this. This is the Nikon L35 AF. It's got a nice f2.8 lens, 35mm lens, and it's a great little camera, and this is one of the cameras of the moment. It's very popular. I don't know why it's more popular than other point and shoots, but it is. This is quite expensive. This camera's got quite expensive. I've seen them advertised at £250 to £300. Well, now maybe they're worth that, I'm not sure, but whether they are or not, there are pretty much identical cameras available for much less money, like this Konica. This is the Konica, what is it, C35 MF, and it's got a 38mm f2.8 lens. It's got a Hexanon lens. Konica Hexanon lenses were very, very, very fine lenses. This is an autofocus, auto exposure, auto wind, auto rewind, auto flipping everything camera, the same as the Nikon L35 AF. All you do is look through the viewfinder, press the button, and it will take your shot. And these are really good cameras for general walk around use. I like doing street photography with these cameras. I think they're absolutely fantastic for that. This will do everything that the Nikon can, and it will do it for much less money. Whereas the Nikon cost, or can cost, between £250 to £300. This camera, I bought this camera for £25, and I bought it maybe a year and a half ago. So you'll certainly get one of these for between £50 to £60. They're available, and you know, even if you don't get one of these exact Konica cameras, you will find a point and shoot with a 2.8 lens from one of the major manufacturers with a 35mm f2.8 lens, much cheaper than you can buy the Nikon camera for. This is the Konica version. Keep your eyes open for similar products from the other manufacturers. I use these cameras a lot. I think they're great. I'm not sure why they're not so popular at the moment. It's a very, very easy way of shooting. And it's a great way of shooting if you want to concentrate on composition and image rather than fiddling about with technical stuff, entering exposure values and all of that. Very, very simple, very, very easy camera. There are others, of course. I've got here a Vivitar camera. These are even cheaper than the Konica that I've just showed you. This is the Vivitar PS35, and it's got a 35mm f3.8 lens. Okay, so this doesn't have a 2.8, but you know, it's even cheaper. These cameras go for what, 20 to 30 pounds, and they're great little cameras. They're autofocus, they're auto exposure, and they'll make you a very nice image. They're very useful for working on the street if you want to do street photography, because they're discreet. They're not a big flashy SLR that draws attention to itself. You can shoot from the hip with one of these nice and discreetly, and everything's fine. You know, it's a great little camera to use on the street. Very cheap and a very able tool. So don't turn your nose up if you take my advice at point and shoot cameras from the late 80s and 90s, because they were state of the art. They were as good as it got, and they were popular at the time because they had automatic functions. Photographers had had so many years of painstakingly focusing, painstakingly reading the light and entering the exposure values. All the other faff that used to be associated with photography was blown out the window by these cameras, these auto everything cameras, and they were really appreciated at the time for that. And I think that that is a quality that they still have over and above many other film cameras. They may not be as flexible, you can't interchange lenses, sure, but they are very, very convenient, very easy to use, and very nice and subtle to use on the street. So there we are. There are lots of cheap film cameras you can buy. You don't have to pay top dollar. You don't have to pay through the nose to get a really nice camera. My pick of cameras here, well, from the rangefinder section, I'd probably go for one of these because I like the look of them. I think they're very cool. They're slower to use than some later cameras, but I just think they're a beautiful thing. So I picked one of them from the rangefinder section. From the SLR section, my choice would be the Olympus OM30 because of its look and the fact that it can mount all the fantastic Zuiko lenses. And from the point and shoots, the cheapy point and shoots, I'd take the Konica because it's got that 2.8 38mm lens, which is nearly 40mm and just my favourite focal length for, certainly for street photography, but often for other photography too. I think 40mm really works well. So I hope I've inspired you. I hope I've given you some inspiration for your search, to inform your search for a film camera. Get into film. It's fantastic, it's fascinating, it's a beautiful technology, it's a magical technology, and I think every photographer should know it and should understand it because that's where it all came from. Okay, so I guess that's it from me for now. Many thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, maybe chuck us a sub, that would be appreciated. Many thanks go to subscribers. Thank you very much indeed for your support, and many thanks go to patrons also. Thank you very much indeed for your support. Many thanks to both patrons and subscribers. Thank you. Thank you also to anyone who watches, to anyone who tunes in, to anyone who's engaged with the channel in any way. Give them thanks, super thanks, and all of the rest of those things. Thank you to everybody. I appreciate your viewing. So I guess that's it from me for now. If you're not doing anything too irksome, irritating or bothersome next week is around this time, please do tune in for a spot more zenography. Cheers everyone. Cheerio.